How real is too real? Getting real is one of the most important principles for getting to breakthrough. Yet it can be challenging to strike the delicate balance between being authentic and oversharing. Our guest today helps business leaders, executives, and teams strike that balance and share their story and personal brand in a way that's authentic, real, and compelling.
If you don't control your narrative, people make assumptions. So I kind of believe in front loading some of your vulnerability in a way that doesn't diminish your power, but lets you connect to your audience so they have a more three-dimensional view of you rather than just what is in front of them.
That was Allison Kluger, lecturer at Stanford Graduate School of Business and president of Allison Kluger Media Consulting. Drawing upon more than 25 years of experience in broadcast media and entertainment, Allison has created courses at Stanford on reputation management, communication, personal brand, and strategic pivoting. She's a leading voice on how to effectively manage your reputation and share your authentic self. And she's here today to help us better understand how to shape our own story. I'm Kim Christfort, Chief Innovation Leader for Executive Accelerators and the Deloitte Greenhouse. You're listening to Breakthrough by Design, where we chat with a diverse array of guests, from scientists to CEOs, academics to athletes, exploring what it takes to get to breakthrough. Allie, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Breakthrough by Design. I am so excited to have you here today, not only because of your incredible depth of expertise, but because you also happen to be a brilliant and beautiful long-term friend. So I'm loving that we get to do this together, and I cannot wait to hear your perspectives on getting real.
Thank you.
So before we get started today, I'm just curious because usually you are always doing things that I go, ooh, I want to do more of that, or I want to read about that. So what are you getting inspiration from right now in work or personal life?
It's surprising, Kim, because sometimes it just comes in front of me. It starts with my students here, and you've been a student at the GSB. It's because we have so many international students. I have students of different ages, spanning from 24 all the way into their 40s. And I am just so interested in people's stories and their narratives and what makes them tick and what their dreams are. They really inspire me. I'm a storyteller and I'm a voracious reader and I'm a pop culture nut. And so you'll always find me absorbing content. If I watch a show or I read something or I see a movie, I'm always in my mind figuring out how can I weave that into my lessons to make it more approachable or more relevant. So it's kind of like every day how I take in content and I take in people. And by the way, it also includes me eavesdropping on a lot of people.
Well, that is a fabulous aspect. I always remember stealing your magazines when you were done reading them so that I could also be relevant, because that unfortunately is not something that comes natural to me, being plugged into the cultural pulse.
Well, I don't do accounting, so there has to be something else I can bring to the table.
I love it. Allie, I heard that you are actually spending time writing a book right now and not just being on the reading end of it. So tell me more about what is this book and who is it for?
Well, I was invited by a friend of mine, Stacy Cohen, who wrote an amazing book for high schoolers called Brand Up. And this is to help young people figure out their personal brand, be proactive about it, identify what differentiates them. She's taking kind of the success of Brand Up and she's writing a new book on personal branding. And she asked me to contribute 2 chapters to it: how personal brand relates to reputation and how personal brand relates to executive presence. But my book, which is still on hold but is full of little sticky notes, not only in my head but on the wall, is a book that I want to write called Crushing No. And it will dovetail into all the classes that I teach, but it's really about getting to the yes, because I truly believe that it's not one decision that leads you somewhere. It's being fluid and flexible. And if something doesn't work, don't take it to heart. Be strategic. What's another way to approach this? Who else can I talk to? How can I change my narrative? The yes might not be exactly what you hope for, but it will get you somewhere. I'm waiting till both my boys get into college and they're 18 and 17. One's already going because there's just no time, as you know, from also being a mom.
Totally. I love the crushing no philosophy, though. And so much of that is linked to breakthrough thinking and what we're talking about with this podcast, because you really do need to silence the cynic or whether that's your own or someone else's, that something's not possible, you need to bring in other people, that Motley Crue thinking. I can't wait to read it once you have the time to actually lean in. I want to give our audience a sense of what your career journey has been, Allie, because I think it's so unique. You've had this career that's gone from broadcast media all the way to what you're doing now at Stanford Graduate School of Business, co-lecturing with Tyra Banks of all things. And along this way, you've really been able to think about what your authentic self is and how you get real and create a path that works for you and who you are. So can you just tell us a little bit about that career journey and how you ended up where you are?
Absolutely. I'm a New York City girl. I went to University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I honestly thought I was going to be a businesswoman because my dad went to Wharton Business School, and I got there and could honestly basically not get through economics. My love has always been reading and art and people and storytelling, so I switched to Annenberg School of Communications and English. While I was there, I created my own show at Penn called Penn PM. I interned at a radio station. I interned at KYW News and I interned at Good Morning America. And I remember going in, there's usually about 50 interns over the summer, and I said to myself, I'm going to be the one they remember. And because my end goal was I'm going to work here. And how I did that is really my philosophy in life, which is be memorable, but also know everybody and let everybody see you doing the work. So Good Morning America is from 7 to 9 a.m. But my job as an intern was 9 to 5. I came in at 7 every morning and I went to the studio and I watched every show live. But I also got to know the camera crew, the stage managers. I got to sit in the green room and see really cool celebrities. Then I would say, can I come and go on a shoot or can I sit in the editing suite? For me, it was a free education. And there wasn't anything too small that I was willing to do as an intern, which sometimes included picking up someone's dry cleaning or coffee. I made sure I knew everybody. I offered to come back senior year for vacation relief. And sure enough, I got hired 3 days after graduation. And I also got an offer at ABC Close-Up and the Barbara Walters special. So it was fortunate that I was so focused. I spent 8 years at Good Morning America. I hit my ceiling, which meant I wasn't being paid a lot and I didn't see any growth. And I was wooed over to a nascent venture, which is home shopping. It was a new shopping network by Barry Diller and Diane von Furstenberg. And it was for New York audience mostly, selling yuppie type brands like Weber grills and computers and things like that. So I went over to produce it and my host quit and they said, you be the host. And so here I was kind of like, well, that's not me. You know how we all face that? That's not me. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. For 8 years, I've been coaching people how to be on air and message and be persuasive. And so I then became the host of the home section and the gardening section. And I was the highest selling host and I was on air 4 hours a day. And each show was an hour with 20 products. So my education was, how do I give you context for this product? How do I demonstrate it? But how do I tell a great story so that everyone in the audience can find themselves and think, you know what, I cannot live without this Weber girl. And then I moved into the control room where I controlled the whole show. And I think that was my sweet spot. All the talent wanted to work with me because I had been talent and knew how to talk to them and nurture them. And then I was invited to start up a new shopping network called Global Shopping Network. And now I'm an executive producer of over 100 people, 17 hours of live television. And I host to relax and I create shows. And I'm also the face of the network. And then, believe it or not, this is like 4 years in, I get a call from ABC. They're starting up a show with Barbara Walters called The View. They have me run over and see the pilot, and they pretty much hire me on the spot. And I said yes. So this was a fabulous job. I'm now in the ears of Barbara Walters and everybody. It's network TV. It's award winning. Then my husband wants to go to Stanford Graduate School of Business, Kim. Can you believe that? I move and I have to find a job to support us. So I start up a .com for women during the .com craze. A year later, we're a .com disaster. But as with anything, if you make yourself known, people look for you. And I was snapped up by interactive television, Open TV. I spent 3 years there. And then I worked with Al Gore for a year, starting up his network called Current TV. At the last day of my consultancy, I found out I was pregnant after 9 in vitros. And I was so excited. So I had Logan. And then when Logan was 6 months old, I found out I was 5 weeks pregnant naturally with Evan. And so I spent 7 years starting my own media consulting business and parenting. I thought about when they're going to be in kindergarten and first grade, what's my next move? I can't go back to television. It's a very low paying and also very demanding job time wise and unpredictable. And I'm like, you know what? I think I want to teach. And I'm right next door to Stanford. I came up with a proposal and I shopped it around. It was for reputation management, strategies for successful communicators. Ultimately, one of Mark's professors introduced me to J.D. Schramm, who started the Mastery of Communications program here at Stanford. And I presented him with a full proposal with all these guests I would bring in. And he's like, I need a class for the spring. Let's teach it together. And that was my entry into the GSB. And I'll tell you, my goal was just to have one class. And this is part of what I believe in, kind of your authenticity and being real. Like, get your foot in the door, and then your brand will come out and you can fine tune it. So I started with this one class. He really liked working with me. He said, can you teach strategic communication with me? I said yes. And then I created my personal branding class with Tyra, and I created strategic pivoting with A-Rod, or Alex Rodriguez, and 2 electives on media training and executive presence for women. So that all grew out of my own personal brand. And here I am now, 10 years later.
Amazing story, Allie. I really want to talk a lot more about this amazing class that you created with Tyra Banks and how that came about. But before we do, as you describe the amazing progression of your career journey, one of the things that really stood out to me as I'm thinking about this from a Get Real lens is your focus on people. It's really important to be memorable and to know everyone. And I can confirm, knowing you as a friend, you are incredibly personable. That is a very real and authentic part of you. So I'd love to hear about how you think your ability to be so authentic helps you get to know people and have them want to bring you in. How has that worked for you?
I get asked this a lot, which is, what's your origin story in the way? And I tell people I'm really an introvert. And nobody believes me because, as you said, I flex outwards as a very kind of personable, extroverted person. But I was the shyest kid. I was oversensitive. I cried at the drop of a hat, and I hid behind my mom. And I was afraid of new experiences. I have a twin brother, Adam, and I used to like hide behind him. And so being oversensitive, I always think I have like a weather vane on top of my head that picks up all emotions from everybody around me. And, it's in any family, there were stresses growing up. And so I was always just very aware. I also really was kind of an allo parent to my brother in the way that we took care of each other. Being twins, we kind of take care of each other. So I think we both were more mature by looking out for another person always. So anyway, as I started out my career, I just remembered how much a kind word would mean to me, or being heard, or being given an opportunity that I wanted so badly. And I also saw really bad examples of people who were bullies, people who were narcissistic. And what I always learned, or what I felt, was, Allison, you can't take it personally. It's their problem. All you can do in this world is show up as you are and be consistent and be the best version of yourself. So I remember I had a really dear friend, and she was really toxic in a way to a lot of people, because she would get stressed with her job and people didn't really love her. And I just loved her, because when she was toxic and upset and whatever, I'd go up to her and go, what's going on? You seem really upset. How can I help you? And you'd see that she would just relax. And she's like, well, this is going on. And I'm like, you know what? That's terrible. How can I help? And it was just a real lesson that hurt people hurt people. I try to show empathy in the face of difficult people. I find them really interesting. And I'm always thinking, like, I'm going to crack this nut. Even if I can't make you like me, I'm going to make you respect me for my work ethic. And you're not going to be able to say anything bad about me, because I am appropriate and I'm professional.
Allie, it's such an interesting take on getting real. You actually said the words, be the best version of yourself. Your natural state, being very sensitive, picking up on emotions, that could have hindered you. That could have kept you being that shy introvert in the corner. But instead, the best version of that is taking that superpower and helping others to feel heard and understood, which clearly was a big part of your success in your early career.
Thank you. I think sometimes, and I'm sure you've had great mentors, I had one of those watershed moments where I realized, as sensitive as I am, it wasn't going to work for me. And it was my first year at Good Morning America. I was so eager, and I was crying at work. And I don't remember what I was crying about, but I do remember it was personal and not work related. And this older English producer, Sonia Selby Wright, pulled me into her office and closed the door and said, Allison, I don't ever want to see you crying again. Do you understand why? And I was really scared. And I'm like, yes. And she's like, because you're young, you're attractive, and you're female. And no one is going to give you any work, and no one's going to think you're reliable, and no one's going to trust you. Do you understand? And I said, I do. And she said, if you have to cry, you come in my office and close the door. But if someone says to you, how are you doing? You say, I'm doing great. And she goes, do you understand? And I said, I do. And then she was like, get out of here. And she like threw me out of the office and slammed the door. And all I wanted to do was cry. I was so mortified for two reasons. One, because, she kind of gave me this tongue lashing. But two, because I was unaware. Like I thought it was okay to cry. And so that might have been my authentic self, but it diminished my power and was going to create a fixed bias about me, where people would think I was oversensitive or attribute feminine qualities to me and make it like she's not a strong leader. So at that moment, I remember thinking, well, I want to be reliable and I want to have responsibility and I want to be respected. And so anytime I was sensitive, I would just swallow, breathe, and look at them with empathy, or I'd go into the hallway and cry, or I'd take a walk. But it was really the turning point for me of what I always say to the people I mentor, which is I want you to act like the leader you want to be. And it doesn't mean you can't be sensitive, but you need to give context. So if you come in and you're frenzied or upset or even teary, you have to say, you know what, I'm so sorry. My pet just died last night and I am really struggling with it. Or you can say, I'm having a family issue. I'm trying to shake it off. I'm going to go take a walk and come back. If you give context to any big emotion, even anger and frustration, people feel better. But otherwise, they're taking on your emotion in a way they don't want. They don't want to deal with your heavy emotion. So it's not being fake. It's basically showing up the way people need you to show up so they trust you.
I love how you're describing this because we hear a lot that getting real is extremely difficult for people. In fact, we did a survey that said that of all of our breakthrough manifesto principles, there are 10 of them. Getting real is the one that people do the least frequently. And I think it's because of exactly what you described. People feel that there's a tension between expressing how they're actually feeling or what they're actually angsting over and that professionalism that's expected of them. And I hear you saying a couple things here. One is you really need to think about how you want to show up. You are presenting an image and you need to be aware of that image. The second thing you said is it doesn't mean you can't be honest and authentic. You can give voice to what's bothering you, whether that's the pet or the family situation, but you're doing it within context so that, as you say, you're not burdening people. So can you talk a little bit more? Because I think that balance point of authenticity and professionalism is really tough to strike. How do you talk to your students and clients about finding that right point?
It's a great question because it's different for everybody. And I think that's why I love media consulting, because for me, every person's different. I don't have a formula, but I listen to people talk and I ask them their story and I'm able to see what their strengths are immediately and then maybe how they can elevate. But here's a good example that I do give to my students and have given to my clients. So this is, as a parent, I think you'll appreciate this, Kim, but my older son, he stutters, right? And he only stutters when he's really nervous or excited or is unprepared. And he's going to college next year, and he had a college interview in San Francisco with one of the schools. And so we practiced the night before, and I said, okay, let's anticipate, just what I do with my students, let's anticipate the questions you're going to get. And I'll give them to you. So we write the list, and then I start asking him, and he starts stuttering all over, right? He's answering the questions, trying to be smart and all that. And after a while, I just stopped. I said, honey, I'm going to be real with you. You're going to be nervous, and you're going to probably stutter. And I know that's going to make you more uncomfortable and you're going to stutter more. So how about this? When you sit down and you have your first few lines, whatever, why don't you say something to her like, I just want to let you know that I stutter when I'm excited or nervous, and I'm really excited to be here talking to you today. And as I get more comfortable, it will get better. And he did exactly that. And this woman fell in love with him. Do you know what I mean? Like she extended the interview for another half an hour. So it was a whole hour. She wrote him postcards all through the process. He is actually ending up going to this school. But I really believe that that vulnerability, that transparency, his being real with her, really created a bond where she was rooting for him. And she admired him for not trying to just stutter through and ignore it. And I don't think you have to be a teenager for this lesson. People connect to you if they know sometimes what your fears or your hurdles are, because everybody has their own. If you don't control your narrative, people make assumptions. So I kind of believe in front loading some of your vulnerability in a way that doesn't diminish your power, but lets you connect to your audience so they have a more three-dimensional view of you rather than just what is in front of them.
That is such a beautiful story, Allie. And it's also such a great way to get to the heart of why getting real matters. And that is because getting real is being human, and people want to connect with humans. That's how you build relationships. That's how you are able to get to truth and really trust one another differently. That vulnerability up front and that willingness to share and set that narrative, as you shared, is a huge part of being able to get to a deeper connection with someone.
It's hard. Who wants to peel back those layers and be vulnerable? If you want to lead by example, examples also have to talk about your failures and your triumphs. Because if you're just perfect up there as a leader, you're going to feel like I'll never live up to this, or this person's not real, or this person's posturing. But when you say, I've been in your place, I've sat there, I've wanted to do a startup, I want to create a new product. My first product tanked, but this is what I learned from it. That's a much more powerful stance as you talk to your team than, we've got to do this and you have to be strong and you can never fail. I think that scares people and puts them off. I mean, there's a healthy dose of that, but it has to be balanced with the realness and the authenticity.
That's interesting advice. So, from the very start, getting some of that realness out there so that people aren't distracted by making their own assumptions, telling their own narratives. You've set the context for them, and now they're able to actually listen to you.
Correct. I tell this to a lot of students. I do this reputation class and I make them do a survey, an anonymous survey, where they ask them, what am I like as a leader? What's your first impression of me? What's your present impression of me? Would you collaborate with me? What are my blind spots? It's very painful for the students because getting anonymous feedback, which you can't hunt down, is always frustrating. A lot of them get you're cold or you're not approachable. It took me many meetings with you to understand that you're really kind. And the ones who come to me, I say, if you're getting this a lot, it means you need to extend warmth. Like maybe you're intimidating. Maybe they think you're arrogant. Maybe they think you're too good for them. Most people just want to be seen and heard. And at a place like at the GSB, where everybody thinks everyone else is smarter and better and they're the exception to the rule, you can't wait all the time for people to approach you. They're going to create a narrative about you. So you need to extend the hand first. And even if you're shy or even if it's hard for you, you can say something like, hi, it's so nice to meet you. And I'm a little uncomfortable in crowds. What are you doing here? And then you turn it over to them. But you have to take some sort of ownership of who you are and the impression that you want to create, because people make snap judgments just to make it easier for them to calibrate you, really.
Such interesting perspective. And you're right. We're trying to fit people into something that we understand, some pattern we recognize, and make sense of the behaviors we're seeing. And so the more you can help people to have that pattern recognition go in your favor and the way you actually want to be perceived, the better. I'm curious, Allie, because you talk about controlling your narrative, and a lot of what we've talked about is how other people are creating a narrative for you. But of course, you also create a narrative for yourself. And in your career history, when you had the opportunity to be the host of your own show, you said, well, that's not me. And then you realized actually it was you. So, can you talk a little bit about how sometimes what is real for us is not who we are today, but who we aspire to be?
It's such a good point, and it's such a paradox because here I have a lot of students who come in and I am in awe of them, but they're very sensitive. They're worried about everything, keeping up with everybody. And I'm just like, look where you're sitting, right? Like you're here for a reason. And if not you, then who? So I think that the struggle is differentiating yourself and taking the risk. I always say that opt in and figure it out. A lot of us, and I'm going to be honest, mostly women, like they have more of a fear of opting into things that they don't feel comfortable. I have been very scared of things, but what I say is I'm going to say yes and I'm going to figure it out because the deliverable is never 5 minutes later. So even though your knee-jerk reaction to extend your brand or to extend how you are landing on others is that's not me, it can be you. If you do nothing, nothing happens. But that's kind of how I looked at the hosting. I don't feel comfortable with it, but I've done so much to help other people. I probably can do it. I just have to put my mind to it. What you do is you ask questions, you look at videos, you talk to friends, you take seminars. These days there's a lot of ways to fill your knowledge gaps. And then when the deliverable is due, you've put everything into it and you're going to succeed. But it's that middle stage that people get nervous about. And I just say, if you don't do anything, nothing happens. Like, you can sit there and be complacent, and that's totally cool. But if you have a goal, if you have a dream, opt in or create your own opportunity.
You're getting at such an interesting aspect of Get Real, which is that Get Real is not static. It's something that evolves over time, and you can actually make it real by doing all these things that you're suggesting and leaning into that discomfort and educating yourself. And so I think that there's often a perception that who I am is who I am, and that's not going to change. And if it does change, I'm being inauthentic, when the reality is that that could actually stand in your way, and that you need to be very open to embracing things that might make you uncomfortable but could get you to a bigger vision.
You said it so perfectly. And the truth is that you can also say to people, like, this is new for me, but I'm so excited to learn. Some things that I've said in the past, if I've made a mistake in something new, is I'm like, thank you for correcting me. I never make the same mistake twice. While inside I'm dying because I made a mistake. We all want to be perfect, but it's impossible. So I'll say I've never make the same mistake twice. People want to trust you and believe in you. And as a leader, it's part of the gravitas you have, which is, I may not know the answer, but I know someone who does, or I'm going to know the answer by the time you need it. And yeah, there's something performative about that. But I really do believe that when you walk the walk, whatever walkway you choose, whatever lane, if you do it every day, then it becomes authentic. And I go back to the Sonia example. Every day from that point on, I showed up as reliable and multifaceted and a solution oriented person. And I never freaked out. And so my reputation at Good Morning America was like, go to Allison. She's really easy to work with. She's very even keel. She's calm. She's funny. She's a problem solver. But inside, I'm a chicken without a head, and I could flex in and out. Like, my internal was just the way my body reacts to distress and new things. But externally, I knew how to present myself in a way consistently so that I really became the leader I wanted to be. And of course, then the other physical issues and mental permutations you go through, it fades, because then you have your past successes to say, you know what, I did this already. I did this already, or I can do this.
This theme of problem solving is a big part of your brand from what I know of you and heard you speak about. And I actually think you have a very interesting and delightful, if I may say, example of that coming to life and really demonstrating how getting real is so essential to getting to breakthrough. And that example is how you managed to get a class with Tyra Banks. So, would you mind sharing how this solution orientation and you getting real led you to having a class with Tyra Banks?
I'd love to. I surprised myself too. Tyra Banks came to Stanford Business School to talk about branding. And for those who aren't familiar with her, she was a supermodel, a first Black supermodel on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and a runway model. And then she got curvy, and her mom, instead of like saying lose 30 pounds, like her agents were telling her, she pivoted into Victoria's Secret and to Sports Illustrated, where more curvy athletic bodies. She was an actress. She's an author. She was a roving reporter for Oprah Winfrey. She created her own talk show, The Tyra Banks Show. Then she created America's Next Top Model, which had 24 cycles. And she had her own beauty brand. She was on Celebrity Apprentice. She was on America's Got Talent and Dancing with the Stars. I mean, she's constantly recreating. She also went to Harvard for an OPM degree. But I'll tell you, most people just look at her as this beautiful, tall Black woman who's a supermodel. So she's been banging her head against the brand people give her. And if you spend 2 minutes with her, you know that's not who she is. So she's speaking, and I'm learning so much about personal branding, such as it's okay if people have low expectations of you, because it gives you the opportunity to wow them and change their mind. And she says, believe me, people want me in the room for a business meeting because they want to just meet me. And then they have no idea that I know what I'm talking about. So she uses it to her advantage. She also says, cold call anybody, because if you don't, no one's going to talk to you. Leave the party before the party's over. So that's just a few of her tips. So after she speaks, I turn to my colleagues and I'm like, I'm going to go talk to her. I want to teach a course with her. And they roll their eyes and they're like, okay, Allison. And I go backstage and there's a guard there. And he's like, you can't come in. I'm like, oh, no, I can. I said, I teach here and I used to produce Good Morning America and The View. And Tyra's been on both shows. And boom, he lets me in. And I always say, like, I had no permission to do anything I'm about to do. But you know what I say? It's like you have to take some action. So I go in and she's getting ready to go to the airport. And I said, Tyra, I'm Allison Kluger. I'm a former television producer of Good Morning America and The View. I know you've been on both shows. And I teach here. And I was wondering, would you be interested in doing a compressed course on personal branding with me? She said, well, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. Maybe when I retire. I've never done it. Exactly what I said. Like, women, when they're presented with something awesome, they're not like, yeah. They're thinking about what's holding them back. And I said to her, Tyra, I learned more from you in an hour than I've learned from anybody else on personal branding. And I want to put a proposal together and call you in a week. And she said yes. And she gave me her card and we made a date and time and I followed up with the email. In that week, I created this course. It was 6 classes, 3 hours each. And I figured out what the topics would be on personal branding, whether it was visual branding, social media, all different aspects of how to create a tagline and do a pitch. I figured out the textbooks we would read, who we would invite in as guests, what my assignments would be, and the final project would be in a live television station, because I was on the board of a television station here, where my students would have to give a personal branding pitch live on air while Tyra and I gave critique. So I was trying to differentiate it. I called her back and I'm like, okay, this is what I have. Tell me what you want to do. And she was amazing, like more than I ever expected. She's like, oh, we can do this. And I have this framework. And she was just brilliant. We had the most fun. And I said, okay, Tyra, now I need you to commit to these 2 weeks or these 2 weeks as a backup. And she committed. And I said, I'm going to go put the proposal together and go to the dean. So I went back, I did that. And then I do this every time when I'm trying to stretch myself. I anticipate the pushback. What is the dean going to be skeptical about? What is he going to say that's going to put a hurdle in my way? He's going to say, Tyra's not our brand. We don't have celebrities. This is going to be clapping for credits. You're going to cannibalize somebody else's class. This isn't important to students. What's the benefit they're going to get? She's not really a businesswoman. I mean, these are just some of the ones that came up. I put a file together of all her business attributes, and I had an answer for every single thing. And then I went to the dean, and I said, I want to teach with Tyra Banks. The class will be called this. She's committed for these 2 weeks. These are her backup weeks. These are our guests. These are our textbooks. This is how we're going to differentiate. This is how it's going to benefit the students. These are the assignments. And I just presented it exactly how I wanted to teach it. And he asked me every single question, every single pushback I anticipated he did. But I had an answer, and he said yes. The lesson that I tell people from this is if I had gone to him the day after Tyra was there and said, you know, I have this idea. I think I want to teach with Tyra Banks on personal branding. I know absolutely categorically he would have said no to me. I just know it. So what this did, which is my philosophy, is present the solution, not the suggestion. And this is for people who have a hard time sometimes in the moment, but create your vision and then think of all the solutions so that when you present it to somebody, they don't have to do anything but say yes. You've done all the work. And so even something smaller, if you want to move into a new position, you can say, you know what, I think you need somebody leading this position. I would take these 3 people. This is where the budget comes from. These are the projects we would work on. And of course, I'd lead it. And someone's going to probably say yes. Is there a downside? You might not get the yes, but you know what? You'll get viewed in a different way. People will say, oh, this person has moxie, or this person has vision, or this person put work into it. So that's my strategy in life. I did it my whole life. I just didn't know I was doing it. But when I thought about it, I was like, how can I teach this to other people? And I just think it helps people who are introverts. It helps women. It helps men. It's just a more thoughtful approach.
The presenting the solution approach is so interesting also because you talked about women in particular sometimes being uncomfortable to try that new thing. And of course, there's a lot of discussion about this idea of imposter syndrome, where even when you do have the ability to do things, you have all of the background that you need, somehow you feel like you're not ready for that seat at the table. It seems like having that solution and coming with that solution rather than the problem might be a way to help work through that. But can you talk a little bit more? How do you combat imposter syndrome? And do you think that the solution makes that easier or not?
I think we all have imposter syndrome, and I've had it my whole life. My husband jokes because I will go full force to get the job I want, right? I'll do everything I just said to you. I'll present the solution, I'll be charming, personable, know everything, and then I will have the glory of one day. I will be excited and ecstatic, and then the doubt creeps in. This happened when I got the job at Open TV. He took me out for Chinese food, and he's like, you do this every time, right? He's like, you're so excited, you go for it, you get it, and you enjoy one day. And then you have all these doubts and you question yourself and you think you're going to fail and then you always do great. He goes, can we just skip that part and go for the dumplings? When someone's very close to you, they observe your behavior. So I don't have imposter syndrome now because there was a point when I just kind of said, I know what I'm good at now and I have faith in myself and I'm going to say yes to everything and work it out. And if I don't, I know who I'm going to point you to. But for those who do, I think it's important to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like it's not supposed to be easy when you stretch yourself. You're supposed to feel fear and anxiety. But what I say is, how do you handle that? Well, you do the work. You know your content. You ask people. You broadcast that you're pivoting or you're interested. Do you know someone who I can talk to? Is there a course I can take? Can you answer these questions? And I think that's the part of me that's very real. I don't think I'm the smartest person in the room. Like I'm very vulnerable and like, this is new. I need your help, especially with technology. But I think that you can still be powerful and be transparent and let people know that you're so excited for this opportunity, but you need some help in this area. Would they be willing? When I started at Open TV, I was brought on as executive producer of the engineers and creatives, and we were going to create interactive applications for television. So you could go on TV and order pizza or get news, local news, or find out movie times, really like predecessor to the internet. I remember I was in the big board meeting with all the executives, and they're telling me all these cool things I'm going to do. And they ended it with, and you're going to balance the budget for this department. And I'm like, great, no problem, right? I leave the room and I go in the stairwell and I start to heave and cry. And I'm like, oh my God, first day is my last day. First day is my last day. I've never balanced a budget. I didn't know that was part of the job. I wouldn't have accepted it if they had put balance the budget on the job. I'm petrified because numbers are something I'm not very good at and have never had to do. But 99% of the job, I knew I'd be kick-ass. So this one thing is derailing me and making me feel like an imposter. After about a half an hour of this, I go upstairs to a strange bathroom and wash my face in cold water so it turns back to a normal color. And I go downstairs and I say, hey, can someone tell me who does the budget here? They said, Sarah. I went to Sarah and I said, Sarah, I know you do the expense forms. Have you ever worked on a budget? She says, yeah, all the time. I go, put aside 4 hours next Friday because you and I are going to balance the budget. And that was it. I sat with Sarah and I'm like, I've never done this. Show me what you do. And she was great. And we did the budget together. But in the moment, Kim, the crazy imposter syndrome took over in such a terrible way. What I like to say to people is like, why focus on the 1% when you can focus on maybe the 99% or even 80% or 60%? Like, we're not perfect. We wouldn't be going into a new job if it was same old, same old. But you can't stretch and grow and become a better leader if you don't try something new and be prepared to ask questions or even be prepared to fail and then say, you know what? You only have to tell me once. You told me, and now I'm going to learn how to do it the right way. That's how I tell people to combat that imposter syndrome, because we all have it.
Allie, this story is such a great example, too, of how the different breakthrough manifesto principles actually come together. So here's a situation where your authentic self, the real you, is actually quite good at a job. You have the 99% of things you need and the 1% you don't, and yet you get sort of stuck in that doubt moment. But you checked your edge. So you challenged that you could actually stretch yourself and grow beyond it. And you enlisted a motley crew. You reached out and found people that could back you up. And I think that that is really important for us to keep in mind, is that being real doesn't necessarily mean an exercise all alone by yourself in a room or, heaving in a hallway. Being real can be reaching out to others And in fact, so many of your stories are you doing that for others, right? You noticing what their strengths are with your students and helping them to draw those out. You noticing when somebody is upset. So I think it's an interesting take on this, that getting real is as much about helping others do that as it is about doing it yourself.
I appreciate that. I believe that these things that make us self-conscious are actually our differentiating factors that can be superpowers. So one of the lessons Tyra taught in our class was different is better than better. And she also says perfect is boring, which is the name of her book. In personal branding, you don't want to be perfect because to me that equals neutral. Perfect really is boring. There's no quirks or identifying features. You're just there and doing the job well. It's the things that maybe you struggle with or your approach or your different point of view, even if it's a point of view that people don't agree with, that makes you memorable and different and almost committed.
You've talked about this concept of a trust radar in your classes. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is and how you use it?
Absolutely. It's by Daniel Diermeyer, and his book is Reputation Rules. And I use it to teach how do you recover from a bad reputation, but it also dovetails so nicely into being real and being authentic. And so it can be used, for example, with the Tylenol scandal, where in 1982, there was a serial killer and he put cyanide pills into bottles of Tylenol. And Johnson & Johnson, the mother company, instead of blaming this random serial killer, they took complete ownership of it. They said, we don't know what happened. It's our fault. We're taking every bottle off the shelf. We're giving you a refund. And until we figure this out, we're going to keep this away from you. And then they created the tamper-proof cap. So they took this moment of crisis and they made it a moment of impact. And they didn't blame anybody else. They were transparent. So the trust radar is empathy, transparency, expertise, and commitment. So how Johnson & Johnson did it is first they showed empathy. And the first thing they said is, we are so horrified that this hurt people and that people died. And for those families, we are here for you. And then they were transparent. We don't know who did it, but that's not what matters. This is us. It is our responsibility as a company to make sure that products get to you safely. And as soon as we figure this out, we're going to tell you. Then it's expertise. They had the head of Johnson & Johnson be the spokesperson because he's the most credible. And then the commitment until we figure something out. And then they figured out the tamper-proof caps. And so they were committed to making it better, to solving the problem. And what's so interesting is all the products by Johnson & Johnson that came after, I know there was a sleep aid product, on the box it would say, by the makers of Tylenol. Now, that tells you a lot about reputation, personal brand, transparency. It's like they owned it. They turned it around and they're reflecting on it in a public way, which is, we solved that problem. We're committed. Your safety is number one. So when I talk about the trust radar, I always say that the first thing is empathy. If you're in a difficult situation, who's hurt by the situation? Who feels that everything's unfair or whatever? That's who you address immediately. And you say, I can understand, or that's terrible, or tell me more about how you're feeling. And then again, let me tell you how this happened. It wasn't purposeful, and then you tell them as much as you can. You don't say no comment. You don't say legally, I can't say this, right? Because that inflames people. And then again, the top person needs to be the spokesperson. Don't delegate it to someone who doesn't have the power or visibility to make you feel heard or seen. And then the commitment and the timetable to the solution. So I always joke in my class, I will look at people, I will look at current events, I look at corporations under the lens of the trust radar. And really, if I had to encapsulate it in one word, it would be real, be authentic, because that is what people want from you.
You have talked about a number of ways that people can actually feel more comfortable being themselves, shaping that narrative, and actually having a chance to express the best of who they could be or want to be. Are there specific tools or techniques that you would recommend our audience keep in mind to do this for themselves?
It's important to know how we land on people and what our personal brand is. What is our currency? And what I mean by that is, what are expectations of us and how do we show up consistently? So through teaching personal branding, I came up with what my personal brand is. And what I would say is I am blunt but kind. My origin story is I'm a New Yorker, right? I'm not going to BS you. I don't want to waste your time. And I'm so interested in getting to the heart of the matter with you. So I'm not going to pussyfoot around it, but I'm going to say it in a really kind way so you know I care and that I'm on the team with you. There's an exercise that I do in class, and it's called Cake and Icing from Karen Kang's book, Branding Pays. What I encourage people to do is list all the different things they've done in their life, starting from being maybe a teenager. So for you, you had traveling and singing and performing. Aside from being a businesswoman, you're a very artistic, creative person, which makes perfect sense for where you are right now. But we kind of put these things dormant and like, oh, it's no big deal that I was on the swim team or that I did community service. But actually, it really is. If you were on a swim team when you were younger, you know what that tells me? It tells me you got up at 5 a.m. every morning, that you missed out on a lot of school activities, that you're disciplined, that you're goal-oriented, that you're team-oriented and solo-oriented, that you don't mind people watching you perform. There are a lot of strengths in that. Taking all the positions and jobs, internships you have in chronological order, and then writing out the skills. It can be discipline, showing up on time, practicing. For Good Morning America, it's booking guests, having conversations, synthesizing content, being persuasive, making people feel comfortable, setting up logistics, whatever it is. So you do this list, and then you see what word keeps popping up all the time. So for me, when I do this exercise in class, I show them that what comes up is coaching people, leading teams, multifaceted solutions, always innovative, very organized. What's interesting is on this list, producing is my first job, teaching at the GSB is my present job. They both have the same skills. Circle those that keep coming up. That's your cake, and your cake is your functional benefits. That's what you deliver, no matter what your job is. That is going to show up. And then what's your icing? Your icing is how people describe you. Are you friendly? Are you combative? Are you always late? Are you disciplined? Are you innovative? And that's the icing. If you don't know what your icing is, you ask people you work with or even your partner or family, how would you describe me in 5 words? And then take those 5 words. What are the ones that keep popping up? Warm, kind, funny, hardworking. Those are all icing. Then you take your cake and your icing and you put it together, and that's your personal brand promise. So when you're introducing yourself to someone or writing an idea or describing yourself or writing a LinkedIn profile, those are the words you're going to lean into, because not only are they true, but then you have stories. You have real stories you can pull from all these different times in your life that actually demonstrate these qualities. So you can back it up. Does that make sense?
It does, and it makes me a little hungry, honestly.
I always make that joke too, because my slides are always a big, beautiful cake that I just want to inhale.
You're a foodie and come from a very foodie family with Mark. I appreciate the food metaphors. So, Ali, I want to ask a question that we always ask everyone on the show. And that is, in your opinion, what does breakthrough mean? What does it mean to you?
I really thought about this. I anticipated this. What I want to say is that it goes back to the opting in. I ask people in my class, why do you think you're successful? And a lot of people say, oh, it's luck. It's mostly a female answer, but I really don't believe in luck, Kim. I believe that luck is going to Vegas and having your ball land on 12 red. That's luck. I believe that you've worked and you've gotten where you are, and you need to accept praise and you need to know what your skills, your cake is. But I show this quote which says, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And that's Seneca, the philosopher. It gets close to what luck is, but I always doctor it up and add one word. I say luck is when opportunity meets preparation and action. And I just believe that you can be at the corner of preparation and opportunity, but if you don't do anything, nothing happens. So you need to add the action. And then that's your breakthrough. It's opting in of knowing you've got the opportunity, knowing you're prepared, but then what are you going to do with it?
I love that definition. And I do think that it's one of the main reasons that our final principle in the Breakthrough Manifesto is make change. Because ultimately, having great ideas and all these possibilities is sort of meaningless if you don't put it into action and get something done that changes things for the better.
You know, what's the worst that can happen? You try something new, and maybe it's not what you hope for, but you're going to meet some great people. You're going to learn some new skills. and you're going to have some stories to tell that you can leverage. And you're a better person for it. That's what life is about, is creating more stories, more relationships, more connection.
What's the worst that can happen? I actually wrote down earlier in your story a quote that I think is fabulous and may go up on my wall, which is skip the doubt and go for the dumplings.
Oh my God, I think that's my new book title.
I would buy it. Well, Allie, you've shed light on so many nuances around what it means to get real in the world of business. I feel like we have some tangible tools and tips to be successful in doing so. Before we wrap, I'm curious, what is the next stage of your Get Real evolution? How are you going to evolve your own brand next?
Well, since Tyra already cornered the market as supermodel, I'm going to have to pass on that one. I definitely am going to finish the 2 chapters for this book, and I'm going to really be disciplined about writing this book because I'm so passionate about writing. And I hear so many times you need to write a book, and I really believe that people tell you who you are. For me, it's just still making connections, making people feel better for having been in my presence and having a sense of purpose. But I will always be myself. I'm going to show up consistently. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be real. And if you like me, great. And if you don't, go get some dumplings somewhere.
Ali, you are one of the most beautifully real people I know, and I will grab dumplings with you anytime.
That's a date.
It was such a treat to have Ali on the podcast and hear her insights on getting real and managing personal brand and reputation. Her career journey is so impressive, starting as an intern at Good Morning America to now creating courses at Stanford Business School with legends like Tyra Banks and Alex Rodriguez. Allison's story is a testament to the power of being real, demonstrating how important authenticity is for professional success. She shared many tangible ways to balance personal sharing with professionalism, bring context and solutions to the table, and ultimately show up as the leader you want to be, because it's not just about showing up, but showing up as the best version of yourself. And my personal favorite takeaway from this conversation, skip the doubt and go for the dumplings. If you want to learn more about Allison and other leaders who are sparking transformative innovation in their fields, visit breakthroughmanifesto.com. Thank you for listening to Breakthrough by Design, where we believe everyone has the potential for breakthrough.
This podcast is produced by Deloitte. The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Deloitte. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, go to deloitte.com/about.